I think we can get started. I'm very excited to welcome everyone to Nava Labs Demo Day 5. My name is Christine Wilkes, and I'm the product manager for the form filling assistant that we'll be discussing today. But first, a little bit about Nava. Nava is a public benefit corporation that works directly with government agencies to change the way people experience government services for the better. And our little group is called Nava Labs, and we're a division within Nava that uses philanthropic funding to prototype safety net innovations that government agencies need, but might not be able to fund directly. So we're building and testing new approaches to delivering public services, and we're evaluating how it works, whether or not it works, and advocating for scaling proven solutions. We'll be talking about one aspect of this program, but it's part of a larger program of building tools with AI to support caseworkers who help families navigate and enroll in assistance programs and obtain community resources. These are open source tools that Nava Labs has been building across multiple states and nonprofit organizations, and they're all focused on caseworkers, giving them back their time to connect with families and hopefully access new benefits or more benefits for their community members in need. Within that tool set, we'll be talking about the form filling assistant, which is our latest innovation. And the project overall is a partnership between First Five Riverside County, Amplifi, and Nava Labs. We talked to caseworkers from Riverside County First Five who have generously shared their knowledge and experience with us to help build this tool. And Amplifi is our nonprofit partner that we'll hear from later on in the presentation. The project is being also developed through the google.org Generative AI Accelerator Program. Shout out to some of the folks who are, I think, calling in from that. We're very proud to be a part of the 2025 cohort of projects that are working across various social impact topics. And so for today, I'll be joined by my colleague Jillian Hammer, who's a very talented designer and UX researcher. And we'll also hear from Stephen Rockwell, who's the CIO of Amplifi, our nonprofit partner on this project. And we have a super packed agenda for you. Since this is our first demo day for this new project, we're going to start off with an overview of it and provide some more background on the project. We'll show you basically what we built, what we learned from real caseworkers, and where we're headed next. And we'll also, after that, Stephen will share about Amplifi and Benefit Navigator. And finally, we'll have time for our audience Q&A. And this is a good time to note that if you have a question, feel free to submit it in the Q&A by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so before I dive too quickly into the technology, I wanted to start by centering the caseworker as our focus for this project and for the tool set that I touched on briefly. Riverside First Five has a dedicated frontline staff who are able to meet with families in person in their family resource centers, and they're able to sit down, have a discussion about what support they need, and then also help them with applying for benefit programs. So the tool we're demonstrating today has the caseworker as the core user. During our project, we found that the staff sometimes frontline staff spend about half their time navigating benefit applications. And we also found that in Riverside, up to a third of them aren't able to get through the process due to administrative or procedural challenges, like not having the right paperwork or having some data entry mistakes. And this isn't a specific problem in Riverside. It's actually a problem everywhere. The goal of this project was to answer the question, can AI help staff alleviate administrative burden and also improve accuracy or application completeness? Our project's goal was to build a proof of concept for an AI submission agent that works on behalf of caseworkers. basically our hypothesis was that the agent will make it easier for caseworkers to support families by submitting benefit applications by automating some of the repetitive application tasks, but still wanting to maintain caseworker oversight. And some of this, the fine line and the fine balance between control, human control, and allowing the AI system to have agency is something we've been exploring closely with the caseworkers during this project. And some of the other topics or key metrics that we've been centered on is, does it make it easier for caseworkers to apply for benefits? And does it enable them to submit more accurate applications? And before I go too much further into the technical discussion, I just wanted to ground in a few terms because sometimes I forget to define them or I'll just rattle them off. So in general, today we're talking about AI. And within AI, sometimes we refer to generative AI, which is when AI models are able to generate new content such as text or images or even code these days. And so folks are becoming more familiar with that because of the power of large language models or LLMs. And these actually power kind of in the background of ChatGPT. So now folks are using that more, so you might have more familiarity with that. And so now the next generation of innovation is AI agents. And basically, we're harnessing the power of these large language models to not just respond to questions, but to actually take actions on behalf of people. And this was a huge topic in 2025, and I think it's safe to assume we'll hear about it some more in 2026. All right, I think we can now dig into what we've been able to build so far. Okay, so we just wrapped up phase 1 of this project. This phase was focused on building a minimally viable product MVP that could fill out forms using test data. Our goal of this first phase of the pilot was to validate whether or not the technology actually worked and if users would find value in the tool. So what exactly did we build? I'm gonna do a quick demo so you can see our latest prototype that we tested with caseworkers. And you'll also see in our next demo day, we'll continue to evolve. This product will continue to improve and look differently every time you see it. All right. So the scenario you have here is that we're a caseworker. We're sitting down with a client named Rosa Flores. They have an opportunity to talk, and Rosa's pregnant, so they decide that they're going to apply for the WIC program or the Women, Infant, and Children program. So the first thing the caseworker applies is providing the client's name, the application URL, and the agent will use this information to basically go query the case management system and the database behind the scenes to retrieve that data, and then also simultaneously open up the application using the URL provided. So you'll see that the application is loading on the right. This is an embedded browser. Just wanted to validate. Can you see my video? Okay, great. All right. So you'll see on the right, the form has loaded. Now the agent is pulling the data from the test data database, and then the agent is actually evaluating the form, taking a look at the different opportunities to fill it in, and then assessing what information it has available to it based on the database. And then it's actually taking the action of filling in the forms that it's able to recognize. And you'll see on the left in the chat, it's kind of live streaming what it's doing as it's making decisions and as it's taking actions. So that's one of the key design conversations that we've had during this project is how much information do customers want to see or do caseworkers want to see? How much transparency, how much back and forth? Because these large language models can be very chatty if you want them to be. They can also be very, concise and not share any information if you tweak your prompt too much. So you'll see on the right, it's, going through the form, it's actually has to make some decisions as well. So another thing I wanted to highlight is, the level of autonomy, the level of rationalization we allow it to make. You kind of want to be able to control that with the prompt. So, whether or not we want to lock it down and just have the agent apply like the most obvious, like phone number, versus fields that could require some, additional interpretation, which is then utilizing large language model, their strengths basically. But, it kind of reduces the overall control that you might have. So we've kind of we've done time tweaking the prompt to try and get to a point where we feel very confident in the performance of those decision making, but also we're not tying it down so much that it can't use the strength that it has in making determinations of, if a thing like the date of birth is worded differently, or if a field is something like where do you live, and then you're able to the agent is able to interpret like what would be the closest clinic to where that person lives. We want to be able to harness that, power. So what you'll see on the left here is the agent summarizing what it did. It's also going to provide important notes on things that the caseworker should pay attention to now that it's completed its assessment of the form and its attempt at the form. And it's also going to say, these are some fields that are missing. I didn't have this information. Please go ahead and either ask the question and fill it into the chat, or you'll also see that caseworkers can actually take over and take control of the application and fill it in manually. So I'll do that next. All right, so now the caseworker is actually going to take control. And in this screen, the caseworker is able to click on any of these fields, edit them, make changes based on, let's say information has changed since it went into the case management system. And rather than, maybe wanting to chat with the agent, they might just prefer to take control and make those edits. And a couple of other reasons why we needed to be able to have this feature was a lot of forms have things like CAPTCHAs that are specifically built to not be filled out by bots. And also the final submission step, we decided as a team that we'd prefer the caseworker make the decision whether or not something's ready to submit rather than allowing the agent to make that decision. But of course, it's a button, so an agent could press that button if that was, the functional decision that we wanted to make. All right, so how do we do this? I'll try and keep this a little bit quick, a little high level, because we'll do a more technical demo in the future. But this is the approach we've landed on. The technology is certainly changing every day. So, next time we talk about this, it might be slightly different. But on the front end, we're using Next.js and Vercel SDK or software development kit. For the embedded browser that I showed in the demo, we're using a WebSocket to display a remote browser. And for the takeover mode, we're using Chrome DevTools protocols to actually take those actions manually. On the agent side, we're using Mastra, which is an open source agent framework that allows us to also use the Playwright MCP to have the agent actually take action and interact with form elements. Playwright is, typically used for automated testing, but also can be used in this context. And then during our project, we were working on figuring out which models we wanted to use. And so ultimately landed on Claude Sonnet 4.5, and we're actually using that through Google's Vertex AI platform. And that's because that model excelled at this task above the other models, the other foundational models. But again, technology is changing, so we'll continue to evaluate as things get better. Another question you might be asking yourself is, how are we building this securely? So the approach we've taken is focused on having a very secure infrastructure in the Google Cloud Platform or GCP. Our AI models are through Vertex AI specifically in order to provide more security assurance and also to be covered by Google's general agreement to not train models with our data. And both GCP and Vertex AI are FedRAMP High. which means the software meets the US government's toughest cloud security standards for protecting highly sensitive information. And the final thing I wanted to touch on is that, a lot of government websites that host these applications actually have bot detectors blocking remote servers from their websites. So Cloudflare actually has introduced a new program to help website owners be able to distinguish which bots are willing to kind of play game, like be able to identify themselves and what they're doing, what their goal is with their bots, and which bots are potentially not willing to go through that verification process and could be potentially bad actors. So they're providing that feature. So we're actually in the process of becoming a verified bot, and have made updates to our code to be based on their standards, our documentation to be based on their standards. All right, now I'm going to hand the mic to Jillian to talk through our discovery learnings.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Yeah, really excited to share some initial impressions that we've heard from caseworkers as we've been testing this first phase of the pilot. First and foremost, caseworkers immediately saw the value in the tool. They talked about time savings and how it was surprisingly easy for them to use, and that they'll be able to serve more clients more effectively. But ultimately, these productivity gains are really only meaningful when they're built upon the human expertise and the human relationships that are at the core of this work. For example, Riverside's frontline staff and leadership are all really aligned in this shared belief that clients should only have to tell their story once. And this is sort of the value proposition that we've built around the form filling assistant as well. Because right now, typically if a client wants to apply for a program, they complete those applications one by one over multiple different visits. And as you can imagine, because that information doesn't carry over between applications, every time they return, staff might have to ask them to repeat themselves across those different agencies. What's their financial situation? What are their personal family details? And so for Riverside, when they talk about, clients or families only having to tell their story once, that means less inadvertent re-traumatizing. And in the case of the form filling assistant, like Christine went over, the agent pulls existing client data from their case management system that they already collected on intake through an API call, and then uses it to take a first pass at filling out the application. So, caseworkers and their clients aren't starting from a blank form each time. Of course, data sharing agreements, the reality of those, the reality is that those can create, a blocker to production. And our government stakeholders were really successful in getting buy-in from their legal and IT teams at the county by sort of invoking that shared language that they have. If this tool is successful, this is one way that families only have to tell their story once. And in the meantime, we were able to build prototypes with synthetic data to sort of demonstrate what it might look like when systems can work together. And in the end, that we were able to, share those demo videos with our government stakeholders and counterparts, and that kind of got people excited and moved that paperwork along a little bit faster than it otherwise would have gone. So that was an early lesson that we learned, that we didn't really necessarily have to wait for like perfect interoperability to start building. We could do what we could with what we had and try and use that to build buy-in. Another principle that we've tried to stick to is to design for the in-person conversation, not to replace it. After all, clients are coming into family resource centers specifically because they want to talk to a human in person, not over the phone or not over, not using some automated system, but in person with someone who they know that they can talk to, who will listen to them and will help them see the application all the way through to the end. Right now, clients and caseworkers fill out the application sort of line by line. And this process, even though it's quite tedious, often leads to that conversation and rapport building. So we know that, by introducing this new piece of technology that essentially kind of replaces or automates that natural sort of getting to know you flow that happens when you're going through application with a client, it could disrupt that. So in an effort to sort of mitigate that risk, we designed the interface to be as sort of heads up as possible, in that we wanted it to be transparent. We're displaying the agent's actions in the browser. We're showing the embedded browser through a WebSocket connection. And that way they can watch the application be filled out together, or they can sort of let it run in the background and continue their conversation as they normally would. In testing, we heard pretty quickly that we may have sort of overcorrected a bit on that sort of visibility. A lot of them said, this is going too fast. It's a little bit overwhelming to see. Although the sort of stream of consciousness design pattern is quite common in AI tools right now, it ended up being, we ended up learning that's sort of inappropriate for this in-person context where they're trying to stay focused on the conversation that's happening right now, rather than be distracted by what the AI is doing. So our takeaway for the next sort of version of this prototype is to find a nicer balance between visibility and simplicity. Try to figure out what just the right amount of information is, and when we should pull the caseworker in at sort of key moments, like when they need to verify something or provide a missing data field. But that being said, we still want to make sure that users are in the driver's seat and really encouraged to intervene rather than defer to the AI system. A byproduct of manually filling out these applications is that they know exactly, where the client data is being entered and how. They're very hands-on throughout the entire process, right? And with the agent now handling that form filling, that changes. And we run the risk of users sort of letting the agent go on autopilot mode. So we're testing multiple different ways for users to stay in control of how their data is being handled by the AI through a human in the loop sort of UX pattern that's complemented by some UI elements like a persistent stop button and the takeover button, which Christine showed in the demo. Despite building some of these guardrails in, we were really surprised to hear in testing that caseworkers overwhelmingly trusted that the AI would be more accurate than they would at data entry as humans prone to error, to mistakes. Yeah, this was definitely a surprise to us, and the stakes are high. If there are inaccuracies in the application, it can be rejected down the line. And we know that mistakes or hallucinations are sort of inevitable in LLMs. So for us, we want to make sure that the form filling assistant is able to meet the really high expectations that caseworkers have by enforcing, accuracy checks and data verification within the workflow, really investing in security and privacy infrastructure, and importantly, providing training for caseworkers about how AI works and how it doesn't work, and how to translate that to plain language that they can use with their clients so that they understand what's going on as they're gathering their informed consent before using this tool. There's so much that we've learned from usability testing, but for now, I'll just leave it at these sort of three main takeaways: that clients should only have to tell their story once. That charge is something that we continue to use as our North Star as we iterate. Designing for the in-person conversation and not to replace it, and making sure that we're empowering users to intervene rather than defer to the system. But ultimately, what this really boils down to is this feeling that AI agents, they can navigate the systems, like the portals, all the forms, going back and forth between tabs, but the human work of discerning complex family scenarios and making sure a client feels heard, that definitely still belongs to people. And as we iterate with this new emerging technology, we're so excited and grateful to be building with the people who provide and receive human services, and so that we can ensure that their needs are being centered as the foundation of every decision that we make.
All right, so we talked about our phase one, and now we'd like to talk about, what's next. So now that we are able to pivot to our phase two, we're really focused on figuring out how to test and to verify this technology works in a real world context. And also, if we're able to, we'd like to also experiment with new features and refining the UI or the user interface that we are able to build in the first phase, but we can refine on in the future. So we'll be dedicating a lot of our time and energy to setting ourselves up with real world data to allow us to have that testing with caseworkers. They're able to use it in their actual everyday workflow and be able to give us feedback on that experience. We're also going to be making some of the tweaks to design that we heard during pilot testing. So refining, where buttons are placed, helping people find certain elements faster. And like we talked about, refining that how much conversational content is too much or too little. So once we're able to accomplish those milestones, we'll also turn to enabling data to be passed from Amplifi's Benefit Navigator tool to our agent to help provide additional information and make the application data more robust. Um, One of the remaining features we heard from our pilot caseworkers pretty loud and clear is that I think Jillian might have prefaced this a little bit, but basically, is there a way for us to bring voice into this conversation so that folks don't actually have to be distracted by a screen or a chat? So we are hoping we can experiment with ambient AI as well. And then another feature that really came up repeatedly during the pilot is the ability to apply to multiple applications at the same time. So you can imagine, it's already faster to use AI to fill out one form, but if you came in to apply to 3 different programs, if we could run them all at the same time, that would really speed up the business value or the total value of the product. Towards the end of the project period, we're planning to look for opportunities to continue the pilot and document our findings. And then we'll also make sure that we clean up and document our open source code base. All right, with that sneak peek, I'm going to pass the mic over to Stephen, who's going to talk about Amplifi and Benefit Navigator.
Thanks, Christine. Um, wow, that's tremendous amount of progress in just a little bit of time. Reflecting and listening to you all about it was just early part of this year that the Nava team and Amplify team were getting together to say, hey, what's next? We had done the chatbot pilot, and is there ways to extend this work? And so when we settled in on this concept of can we use an agent to speed up and at least partially automate the application process and to see that go from sort of concept to proposal to implementation in this cycle has been or in this year has been really impressive. Um, and so let me first give a little bit of background on Amplify and we are I like this line, human-centered, tech-infused, and poverty busters. And we have just recently changed our name from Imagine LA to Amplify, and we have, with this project and a few others, gotten ourselves beyond Los Angeles and consider ourselves now a national organization that's co-creating technology rooted in lived experience and transforming community insights into tools and policies that equip people thrive. And everything that Jillian just went through um, is very much of that ilk. I've certainly sat in on an and or participated, given a number of webinars over the last year on agentic AI, and almost none of them have here's how users are interacting, here's what their preferences are, here's what our deep listening to users um, is, and here's what we're going to do to adjust based on that, which is probably why a lot of AI projects are failing in the private sector, to be quite frank, is that they're not doing that change management work and that deep engagement with users. And so that's really important to us. I think at Amplify and certainly it sounds like at Nava too. We've got uh, a number of tools. The biggest one is the Benefit Navigator, and that's really supporting caseworkers. That's sort of how some of this has come about. In that we found a great partner in Riverside who wanted to take advantage of the benefit navigator for some of the things you see there on simplifying access to public benefits, um, and helping their caseworkers plan with their clients that journey from experiencing need, figuring out what public benefits and tax credits folks might be eligible for, helping them apply, and then helping them ultimately get on the path to economic independence. So far, you can see some of the outcomes that we've had and the impact we've had. And so we really just want to note here too that this partner and seeing innovation happening and innovation cycles happening with local government has been really fun to be a part of. And thanks to the Riverside team uh, for being such incredible partners in that effort. So that's a little bit about us and what we work on with the Benefit Navigator. You can see it's really closely tied to this agent work. Um, I did want to just take a step back and say a little bit about what I see some of the ramifications for this work. First of all, this is one of the leading agentic projects in social impact, period. And so even as Christine noted, though, that the technology is changing rapidly. If we think about it, the MCP protocol, which is the thing that we've all settled in on as the way that we're going to use LLMs to talk to systems, was only created 13 months ago. And everything else around that has been shifting pretty quickly, right? And so us sort of putting some stakes in the ground early on to say, hey, this is what we're going to do for now, but then needing to be continuing in learning mode, not only with users but with the technology as it shifts. And so stepping into that. Instead of waiting to see where it's all going to sift out, I think is an important principle that we have. Jump in, learn, do rapid cycles. That's an important part of the work. Um, I, I also think that this is um, really a fundamental part of the long-term solve. If we're talking about reducing administrative burden, we heard from caseworkers in Riverside that like the double entry thing is annoying, and it's annoying for beneficiaries who have to tell their story again and again and again. So reducing that, or hopefully eventually eliminating it, this is like a primary pathway to do that. Um, we also think there's a story to tell around accuracy. You heard uh, some of the caseworkers in Riverside saying, like, actually, I think the AI is doing a little bit better job than maybe what humans would do on accuracy. Copy and pasting can be a tedious exercise prone to mistakes, right? And that then affects application quality, and then that affects potentially lower error rates, right? So part of the solve that we're seeing with HR1 and needing to lower error rates is like getting the applications to be of higher quality so that there aren't errors on them. And so the role of the agent in that story, I think, is important as we proceed. And then, of course, notifications and status updates, we haven't sort of delved into that, but a big part of the burden uh, of both the beneficiary wanting to know where they're at, but also on the other side of that, needing to keep people up to date. We can imagine agents being a big part of that. And so I'm a big believer that this is in part the holy grail of solving the benefits access challenge, and really pleased to be part of this work. Let me share just a little bit too about what we're doing with this, with the Benefit Navigator at Amplifi. Um, First, people go through a screening, and then there's here's what you're likely eligible for, and click here to apply. We're adding to that button to say, have the agent apply, or agent assisted, right? And so we can already in the early implementation, start seeing some real efficiency gains for folks as Christine noted, as we expand the number of benefits where we can do that, we're really excited to see that. We also, as noted, want to be able to pre-fill the benefit navigator potentially with the data coming from the case management system so that we don't, again, this double entry is this something we want to avoid. And so being able to pull that data forward into the screener to do the evaluation is really important. So you could start to see a loop, right? Case management data into benefit navigator, pushing that data then over into an application. Noted earlier, but like the multiple applications, so we're not doing it one at a time. As we get more comfortable with one, and we validate the next, eventually we get to the point where we'll have some comfort, the caseworker has comfort to apply for multiple at the same time, right? And that's a big thing that's on the horizon. And like I said before, we're going to continue to update ourselves on agentic architectures. And as things shift, we'll have to make some shifts. There, what you see today is a front end exercise. There's stuff happening on the back end to be able to pull that data from a case management system, but you could also imagine um, complete back-end exercises or agent-to-agent exercises. Maybe someday we'll have a willing party on the state government side that has an agent that's talking to our agent and processing. But you can see where the potential for that and where that might go. So we're going to have to just keep ourselves front-footed on the tech as it evolves. So that's our next steps. We're really excited about that. We think it's going to have immediate impact in the benefit navigator, immediate impact for the caseworkers who use it, and we're just thrilled to. And I don't use that word lightly. I know a lot of people on LinkedIn throw thrilled out all the time. That's not me. We really are thrilled to be integrating this in with the tooling.
Amazing. Thank you, Stephen. All right, so this project is very much ongoing. So we'll continue to hold some demo days in the new year. But we also want you to be able to follow along our progress. So be sure to follow the links for our website and also sign up to follow us on our newsletter. And you'll also then hear about future demo days. So now we have time to go through the questions that we've been able to receive from folks listening in, but feel free to continue to submit them. All right, so first question. So yeah, where is the data coming from? So in this prototype, the data is a test data set based on the real world case management system data set. So basically stub data. And we're working in the next phase to actually switch it over to production data. Another question, how does the client review that the data in the system was correct? So this is something that is it's a very hot topic for us, and I think we'll be dedicating more time in the new year to get that part of it right. Right now, the current state is that the caseworker can click on the button, take control, and look and review the application themselves. And then before they hit submit, they are able to make edits or make tweaks. And so when we talk to caseworkers about what they would do, they talk about basically going through it each field and making sure it's correct with the customer or with the client that's sitting next to them. But Jillian, would you like to add to that question?
I think you covered it well for what we've built so far. I think looking forward, yeah, when we are thinking about what the review process looks like when we're doing multiple applications in one session, we're excited to sort of explore what that design might look like.
Yeah, and I think one of the takeaways that you highlighted was that unless we are very intentional in our design, potentially that review might not happen in the way that we would like. And so we would like to be able to revisit the front end design a little bit to enforce some of those review requirements. Of course, then you run into like, what's the value of the tool if you're still requiring me to click through it? So there's a very fine balance between autonomy and control and also accuracy, or also just like enforcing some human in the loop principles. All right, Stephen, I'm going to give this one to you. Jesse asked what folks are thinking even further out. Do we still need forms? What new mental model is on the horizon?
Yeah, for me, I'm probably going to be a little bit more on the sort of bleeding edge on that question, which is, yeah, I think we don't need them. That ideally we're moving into a world where we get signal about someone experiencing need, and whatever those triggers might be, and that we are then sort of able to push the appropriate data to get someone the benefits that they need. So I do think that, you know, part of that process will be data flows that are driven by agents pulling data from the systems that we know the data exists and pushing them into the systems that need them to make that determination. I mean, I think we're still quite a far ways away from that, but I think that like we're putting in the breadcrumbs now or the architectures to do that. I think another piece of this is memory and AI, and the fact that memory is now portable, that we ultimately could be working on handoffs with from system A to system B, where that memory is being transmitted across. There's some early piloting happening that I'm aware of on that front up in Washington State, and so. I think that that's another frontier that really that possibilities around memory being portable has really only opened up in the last couple months, and so you could see that being a pathway to that too. But I think ultimately, ideally, that's where we would be.
Okay, Jillian, I have a question for you. Can you talk through the UX research process with Caseworker in terms of methods that you used and where in the project timeline they were positioned?
Yeah, I answered it async in the Q&A, but I can still just go over it really quickly. We were really lucky to start the project by going in person and visiting on site, visiting a couple of different family resource centers, which is where they're delivering these services in person. So being able to start there was really valuable. We've been able to sort of carry what we saw and witnessed throughout the rest of the project. Since then, we've been doing remote usability testing, coupled with doing more quantitative stuff like baseline survey, setting up baseline surveys and sort of following up with them in a synchronous interview to dive a little bit deeper into what some of their responses were. So it's been a nice mix of open-ended stakeholder interviews, usability testing, surveys, and it's kind of just been cyclical research, iterating, changing again, testing again, and that's what we'll continue to do and continue to share out.
And what's been cool is seeing kind of consistent feedback across those different usability testing sessions, and also kind of like the same themes coming up over and over again about like transparency versus autonomy versus potentially overwhelm versus like, do we want to see it? Don't we want to see it? Maybe we actually would rather be running in the background. So it's definitely an actively ongoing discussion as a team, but also as we talk to caseworkers about their preferences. I think it could be potentially stemming from the fact that the technology is not only changing, it's getting better, but it's also becoming more like widely understood. So I think that as the project continues to go on, we might see even more of the same, like kind of like back and forth between those tensions and those themes. So we have a question from Dave. So he asks, caseworkers are currently the user, but what are we thinking about in the context of submitting an application that requires creating an account that's tied to the end user and applicant? Yeah, so that's definitely something that we will be experimenting with in the new phase. But one of the reasons why we had to have a take control capability is not only CAPTCHA, but also being able to click on the take control and be able to do things like login or ultimately submit. So that's something that we'll need to validate in the next phase. Okay, we have a question from Nick. How easy or difficult do you see technical integration with case management systems? Are these programs limited by digital facility of partner benefit organizations? Yeah, I think many of you are in this space and probably recognize that data integration is a core issue across all these different nonprofits, community benefit organizations, or government agencies. If we could just, connect data across them, we wouldn't need all these different forms. So I definitely think that whatever we can do on our side to make it easier to integrate will make this product more valuable and more widely acceptable. So we've been talking about, how to design um, we have some creative ideas on how we might be able to solve for some of the limitations that we know organizations have. So we'll be kind of working through that in the new year and should have more interesting ideas next time we have a demo day. But yeah, I think it's a core issue. And as it stands, at least the prototype doesn't solve for that. But we were able to work with the Riverside County First Five to overcome that in their case. Chris asked about Mastra versus orchestration frameworks and tools. I will just say briefly that we've kind of had let's say, a roller coaster experience with Mastra, a really amazing tool set to start and moving way faster than some of the competitors. And now competitors have sort of caught up. And so I think if we were starting today, our dev lead would say maybe there are some alternative options out there. But I won't try to talk too much about that subject, but certainly worth exploring other options and comparing each other at this point in now almost 2026. I don't, Stephen, have you experimented with other frameworks? Do you want to talk about this?
Sure, and it might bleed in a little bit to Dave's other question around standards, norms. I mean, I think which is a good one. And could we get to some agreements? And it also relates back to like, hey, can you get data from the case management system or not, right? Let alone can we, what's the willingness of the government agency for us to be pushing data into an application? Using an agent, right? There's a lot of like pieces here that still need some coordination. I mean, I obviously think that like making some agreements about fronting systems with MCP servers to sort of, get flows, agentic workflows happening across systems would be one of those covenants we might consider making. I think another covenant is around um, the what's portable in memory and sort of what the structure of that might look like in these use cases, and sort of what agency does the beneficiary have in controlling their own data as it, gets transported between systems, right? There are, I think, system-wide things to figure out. Um, but certainly it seems like we've settled in on MCP as the standard, and so more folks who maintain case management or other business systems need to stand that up, so that we can get that going. Obviously, there's also Google's A2A protocol for agents to talk to other agents, and to the degree that we start seeing that happening more, I think we can lean on that kind of protocol um, as well. So there is lots of stuff at play. There's lots of stuff to coordinate and figure out. Um, but the tools have improved. They're going to continue to improve, and I love the idea of like some sort of like let's agree to what those standards might look like. Actually goes back to a idea that Martel had a little while ago, and so we should re-explore that, Martel. It's a great question, Dave.
Awesome. So Jacqueline asked us, and I think Jillian, this might be a good one for you. How did we adjust based on feedback from caseworkers, based on, the kind of back and forth about independence versus autonomy, or autonomy versus control? I'm thinking back to like at the beginning of the project, we weren't even sure if we needed to have an embedded browser because we knew that was going to be a huge technical challenge. Trying to figure out like, do they actually care about that? Um, do they actually, and we, ask them basically. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. We've heard that, yeah, users want to be able to see what's going on. I don't know if it was necessarily that the AI was too independent. In the most recent testing, it was like it's just going too fast. Like it's hard for me to keep up with this like auto scrolling animation that's happening. Um, so I think our adjustment next is figuring out a nicer way to balance what's going on in the chat and the browser. Right now, they're happening simultaneously. It's kind of a lot to ask them to look at both and monitor both. I'm excited to try and find ways to make that sort of cause and effect a little bit more clear. Like if correct something in the chat, is there a way that we can visually highlight that change was made in the browser so they don't have to be like totally glued to their screens and watching everything it does, and they can trust that it's done what it's supposed to do. Yeah, I think it might change too once they get used to it. This was like their first time testing it. I think initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, it's really fast. But maybe once they start using it with like, multiple clients a day and they get used to the system, a lot of them are like, I think I'll get once I have training, I'll be able to use this well. And maybe and we don't want to like overly slow down the agent because that kind of defeats the purpose of using the tool if it's not actually any faster than what they would do on their own. So I think I'm most looking forward to seeing how it evolves once they actually start using it with clients in person, and what kinds of reactions the client has too. Like they want to see what's going on. Is there a way that we can change the speed for them per person or something like that? A lot remains to be seen. It's exciting.
Okay, so Jesse's question is, what does portable memory mean in this context, Stephen? I think you might have used that phrase.
Yeah, I think the tool we have uses memory, and then like an interesting thing, like the Anthropic announcement about skills in that came out this fall. There's a sub announcement around memory, and that they were going to make Anthropic was going to make that portable. It means that you could move it someplace else, right? So as you're interacting with an LLM, you are sort of it's keeping sort of the if it's turned on, it's keeping the context of you've asked questions about these things. You may have uploaded documents or connected to other systems. It's sort of keeping the memory of your interactions with it so that it can do better and better in sort of customizing to you. Well, if you can imagine this in agent world where like we've collected data on you and it's going from one system to another, then that piece could be memory that then gets used in the next system as well. So like when we go to a multi-benefit context, we may want to not pull each data point again and again and again from the case management system. We may want to do that from a memory entity that's already in the system because we've done this a couple times over, right? There's other pieces to that around context that are really important, but that's at least in part how I would see it playing off. The project that I know about that's starting to get underway in Washington State amongst nonprofits, it's like if I've got data about a client, and I need to hand off because they need your services. Is there a way for us to do that using the memory of having that client interact with my AI, and can I push that off to your AI? There's still a lot to figure out with that, but that's some of the stuff that's underway.
I think it would probably be amiss to not, bring up some of the changes that are happening in like ChatGPT world and like you said, Claude or Anthropic's space in terms of being able like rolling out features that are somewhat similar to what we're talking about here. So, I think in 2026 it'll become more mainstream understanding what the possibilities are with agentic. And so things like basically the design methods that Jillian was talking about, like being able to figure out the right way to overlay information with the ability to be able to see what the agent is doing is something you can go experiment with today with ChatGPT. Like right now, they actually kind of have like captions floating on top of the live browser screen. And to Dave's point, they're also trying to solve for the fact that, in order for an agent to be useful, it's going to need to be able to have access to logging into some of the secure systems because without that, then, it'll have very limited utility. So I think we've touched on this a few times, but it's actively being developed in the tech world. And so, applying it to the benefit space is, we're like keeping up with the latest and greatest right now. I think we're at the end of time. I have one more question about the, potential issues with speech to text and transcription, which definitely are real concerns for us as well from Jen. Uh, you know, there's a long history of speech to text not being very inclusive for folks who have potentially, different backgrounds. So we would definitely be experimenting with this modality with that, with an eye on that, and seeing what the performance looks like in 2026. But it's definitely a possibility that it doesn't meet the standards. Amazing. Thank you all for coming, and awesome that we were able to get through all the questions right on time. So thank you, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.